All right. Well, we will go ahead and begin with our introductions, and then as people come in, they can join in as well. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We are so excited to have our first district-wide family engagement nights to do some parent information nights. We have some different ones set up throughout the year. So this is our first one. We did one last night for elementary, and then tonight boundary setting for secondary, so 7th through 12th grade. We're so happy that you guys are here. So thank you for joining us. I am Gina Roberts. I am the Student and Family Engagement Coordinator for all of Petaluma City Schools. And with me tonight is Jimena Gomez, our Wellness Coordinator. And I'll let her go ahead and translate that piece.
Muy buenas tardes. Les queremos dar la bienvenida al taller de cómo ponerle límites a nuestros estudiantes. Ayer tuvimos el de nuestras elementarias y tenemos los de las secundarias. Son estudiantes de sexto a doceavo año. Queremos darles la bienvenida. También estamos aquí yo, Jimena Gómez, como la coordinadora de bienestar, y también Gina, la coordinadora de actividades de familia y de estudiantes. Entonces, go ahead, Gina.
Jimena is going to walk you through how to use interpretation if you would like that piece. And then also I just want to mention we're doing this as a webinar tonight, so it is being recorded and we will send it out to everyone that is not able to attend. But also what that means is you will not be able to raise your hand or use the chat, but we do have the question and answer feature going. So if during the presentation you think of a question, feel free to use the question and answer piece, and Jimena and I will be looking at that. If it's something that one of us can answer, we will answer and type to you at that moment. If it's something for one of our presenters, then we will click the wait and we'll answer that live at the end when the presentation is over.
Les queremos informar que en la parte de abajo está el botoncito de interpretación. Pueden escoger el lenguaje que gusten, pueden escoger el español en este caso, solo hay la opción de inglés o español. También queremos dejarles saber que si en algún momento tienen alguna pregunta, hemos desactivado el de poder levantar la mano. Solamente, por favor, nos pueden mandar las preguntas por donde está el Q&A, que son preguntas y respuestas. A las preguntas que Gina o yo podamos corresponder, las estaremos respondiendo por ese medio. Ya cualquier pregunta que sea para alguna de nuestras presentadoras, las vamos a hacer al final de la presentación. Algo que se me olvidó comentar antes de lo que dijo Gina es que esta va a ser una serie que estamos empezando de dar información a nuestros padres y esperamos que les guste y que podamos seguir dando diferentes temas durante el año. Gracias.
Okay, so we are so lucky tonight that we have Side by Side is a company that we use that works with our middle schools and our high schools, but is also bringing some parent information nights for us this year. So we have Vernon Pope here who is going to introduce our two speakers tonight. And I know Vernon's camera isn't working right now, so I apologize for that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that warm introduction, Gina. My name is Vernon Pope Banks, and I am the program supervisor of Youth Thrive. I apologize that you cannot see me tonight. Unfortunately, my camera is broken in my laptop, and I just found that out today, moments before I logged on. So again, I apologize for the inconvenience. But with that being said, we have tonight two dynamic young ladies that are going to come and present to you dynamic information on boundaries. We have Cecia Jovel and Bianca Pulido, who will be going to share information with you. So please enjoy, ask plenty of questions. They want to engage, so please ask questions, don't be shy. And again, thank you for having us.
All right, without further ado, ladies, go ahead and take it away.
I'm just quickly saying in Spanish.
Oh, yes, sorry.
El día de hoy tenemos dos presentadoras geniales por la organización de Side by Side. Es una colaboración que tenemos con ellos. Bernán es el supervisor de ellas y el supervisor de los programas que se están llevando a cabo en nuestras escuelas de la middle school y también de las secundarias, donde tienen apoyos de grupos hacia nuestros estudiantes. Hoy van a estar presentando, van a tener una presentación dinámica, como también, por favor, acuerden cualquier pregunta que tengan de cualquier tema durante la presentación, hagan sus preguntas que ellas están aquí, especialmente para contestarles sus dudas o cualquier pregunta que puedan tener el día de hoy. Queremos darles la bienvenida. Muchas gracias, Bernal. Muchas gracias, Cecia y Bianca, por estar el día de hoy aquí con nuestros familiares.
Thank you very much for that welcoming. And I guess we can get started and I'll start sharing my screen. Just one quick second. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. Is that sharing okay? Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, so our topic for today will be how to create healthy boundaries. Like Vernon said, definitely this is a conversation started for sure. And if you have any more questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask those questions. And we are here from Side by Side on our program that is based on the Petaluma campuses for right now on Youth Thrive. And we can get started. So who are we? Like we said, we are both marriage and family therapy trainees, myself, Cecia, and Bianca. We are both in this doing our traineeship here at Side by Side, and part of it is also, you know, doing one-on-ones with students, as well as to provide this type of education to everybody who is willing to gather this information for themselves to better their relationship with their kids and just, you know, well-being of the family. We are bilingual and bicultural clinicians, meaning that we both are bilingual in Spanish and bicultural, at least in our Latino community. So if you have any more questions regarding that, we can, you can definitely ask those. And I'm going to skip through this one. And so we're going to go right ahead and say what are boundaries. Boundaries, definitely there. It's a word that we've all heard in the past, but what does it actually mean, right? And so basically the most basic definition that we can give it is these are guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify for themselves what are reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for others to behave around them. So the easiest way that we can think about these are, you know, on our fences or in our houses, we do have these no trespassing signs. And so this is, you know, this allows us to have a safe environment around us. And that's exactly what boundaries do to ourselves, right? And to the people around us. And it sends a clear message that if you violate this boundary, there will be a consequence. And so that is one of the main messages that boundaries do have onto others, because they decide what type of personal boundaries can help you decide what types of communications, behaviors, and interactions are acceptable for yourself and for others. And it's important to know which ones are your boundaries that you want to follow and which are the boundaries that you want others to follow about you. Okay. And so the importance of setting healthy boundaries, definitely, you know, like we can all agree that we would like to set, you know, a clear message for everybody around us on what is permissible and what is not. And, you know, I'm sure that our kids and especially middle and high school kids, they really appreciate that, you know, that personal space. And, you know, it doesn't have to be just physical, but personal space in terms of emotionally or intellectually, or in many other ways that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But in terms of the importance, it's a good way to practice self-care and self-respect for yourself and for others as well, to contribute to that also, you know, the relationship of self-care that that other person might have with themselves. To communicate your needs in a relationship. This is a good tool to use in terms of, you know, setting, I guess, the guidelines, you know, another word for boundaries with others. and it's important to make time and space for positive interactions with others, and to set limits in a relationship in a way that is healthy.
Bianca, do you need us to pause?
Oh,
Okay, you have your hand up, so I wasn't sure.
Awesome. So continuing on, I think we're gonna skip for right now this video, but to just a little bit more ways it kind of talks of what we discussed in the previous slide. And so oops, sorry. We can talk about 6 types of boundaries. We can recognize that we have physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, time boundaries, intellectual, personal, material, and financial. All of them at some point do come across in all of the relationships that we have, including with our children and with our teenagers. But I think for today, we're going to be focusing mostly on the physical and emotional aspect of it. We've had some questions that, how does financial boundaries can go into our relationships with our kids, and it can definitely filter in. And so if there's any questions around that, please feel free to ask them, but we're going to be focusing on the physical and emotional as well as the intellectual ones for this presentation. So in terms of physical boundaries, think about your body, your personal space, the types of touches and the types of permissible ways that you would want to people to interact with yourself physically, and with your privacy as well. This has to do a lot with your privacy as well. These boundaries are expressed through clothing, shelter, noise tolerance, verbal instructions, and body language. It doesn't have to be just touch, but an interaction between all of these types of factors, right? And an example of a physical boundary violation is someone who's maybe talking to you very close, especially in types of COVID now. Like, we're definitely not used to having people as close as we did before. And so, but there is a point where, someone is getting into our bubble and they're breaking that physical boundary. And so a lot of times kids and teenagers, they might be able to, or you have probably experienced some type of physical boundary breaking in that sense. And it's, you have taken upon yourself to really instruct your kid to, just think that, it's okay. It's okay to have some affection towards your parents or towards other people, but it has to be in a more appropriate in a more appropriate manner. And that depends from person to person. And so you might have an automatic reaction to that. And this sends also a nonverbal message, whether we say it or not. Of course, it's when you step back, you kind of communicate that sense of, hey, I have a physical boundary here. And so I would like you to respect that. Other examples of physical boundaries are, or boundary invasions are inappropriate touching, such as sexual advances and whatnot, looking through others' personal journals or letters or any different types of personal items that you might not want other people to see without your consent, or not allowing others their personal space, such as, people walking into the bathroom, your kid walking into the bathroom, or while you're changing and you're, being obviously not okay with that. Some emotional and intellectual boundaries. What we have to say about these mainly is these are important to protect your and for your kid to understand also, or to your adolescent, your middle schooler to really, have that sense of like our awareness of sense of self-esteem and the ability to separate your feelings from others. When we do have weak emotional boundaries, it's likely to getting caught in the midst of a hurricane with no protection, meaning that a kid might feel anxious about, by having this lack of weak boundaries, this might expose them to have to not be able to develop a stronger emotional connection or a stronger intellectual connection or development in general with others and with themselves. And they can greatly be affected. They can be affected greatly by others' words and actions, end up feeling, battered, wounded, and bruised. Given that situation, and they might take a little bit more time to overcome those types of emotional or intellectual injuries, and not knowing how to separate your feelings from your partners or from your kid or whatever relationship, intimate relation that you might have, allows his or her mood to dictate your level of happiness or sadness. So you give in other words, you give other people the power over how you might feel. And so that might be an example of emotional boundary that it has been broken. Another one might be sacrificing your plans, dreams, and goals in order to please others. It might be from, a simple like dinner date with your partner that you might be thinking, and, you're sacrificing those plans, or it might be, something bigger, right, that you're sacrificing for someone else, and just in order to keep some peace around the household or in that relationship. Another one might be not taking responsibility for yourself and blaming others for your problems. Now it's a matter of like, now you can talk about manipulating others, someone else's feelings. And it's important to talk about these things with our children, whether they're in middle school, high school, elementary school, because these are ways that you could protect them to be able to recognize these types of behaviors and how this might be these might be ways that someone might be breaking their emotional or intellectual boundaries. Now, so we've talked about why is it important, what are boundaries, why is it important, and some of the types of boundaries that we might encounter. So we have come up with a couple of points about communication in order for you to kind of just lay the ground and say, so how do I implement this? Why I know now that I need to implement them, or this might be beneficial, but how do I start? So I think a couple of ways that are good pointers, I think, is to be trustworthy with the other person. In this case, this might be your partner, or it might be your middle schooler, your teenager, that this is gonna be a place where we're going to be setting boundaries that are beneficial for both of us, and that we have an agreement that we can trust each other, that we are going to be responsible and respectful of them. Less is more. Sometimes, we can get caught up in the way that we say things, in, trying to add little details here and there. But when you're being, by making it more simplistic or more concise, I think, might be the better word. You might have more success in people understanding what kind of boundary you're trying to establish. And so at the same time, you have to also be precise. I know that this could be, it could be confusing to really think about, but being precise on, like, using a language that is appropriate for your kid to understand. It's necessary for to have that clear communication between you two. Number 4 is about involving your kid in boundary setting. They are as much of they're as important in the process of building the boundaries as you are, of course, as the one that's putting those boundaries there. So it's important to have them collaborate with you, and you collaborate with their setting boundaries. Of course, you're not going to dictate what their boundaries are, but you can definitely have a conversation together in terms of what does the boundaries actually going to look like. This could have posting the rules or posting your boundaries might be beneficial for both of you to be on the same page, and not have any or minimize the confusions, at least, of what are the boundaries that we're supposed to be setting, what are the rules that what is it, that one thing that you don't want me to do. So having some visual representation of that might be helpful for both parties. Recognizing appropriate behavior as well on your kid when they're actually respecting your boundaries, or whenever you're respecting their boundaries, and you see the I guess the natural way that their behavior might be more pleasing to you, or by you respecting their boundaries. I think that it's important to recognize that I see you doing the work, and I appreciate that. It's just one example that what you might say in order to recognize that. At the same time, it's important to avoid labeling a child or a person or anyone as good or bad. Mostly because, obviously bad because you don't want your kid to internalize or label themselves or feel like they're inherently a bad person because they made the mistake of not being, or, they slipped up and they were not able to follow that boundary. But also being, not labeling as good as like, you don't want to, that's a hard way to put it, as like, labeling someone good, because it might put a lot of pressure on someone that oh, well, if I'm a good person, I always need to be like this, I can never mess up. So that could also have like a negative consequence in their ability to, or the way that they see themselves. Number 8, do not undermine the other parent. If you're working collaboratively with your partner or the other parent of your child, definitely is important for you to collaborate. That's a huge word there, or a huge concept there, that you don't want the other person to, override the rules without you knowing, or you doing the same thing to your partner. This definitely needs to be a discussion that needs to be, or an interaction that needs to happen, and you need to be synchronized. I think it's a good word to put it. It's a good way to put it, to just have a clear communication, establish that clear communication. Number 9, employ natural consequences when possible. This means natural consequences are just the you're not adding another I guess punishment, if that's for lack of a better word, I'm going to use that word. Let's say that you put in like, well, if you're not following this boundary that we agreed on, then I guess we're just not going to be able to go out, or you borrow the car keys or whatever, and that's the natural consequences. If this boundary is broken, then this is what's going to happen, but you're not adding onto that, like, an excessive I guess consequence that it doesn't, that doesn't fit in, or, that would be a way of that a natural consequences is are put in place. Obviously, it doesn't apply to every single I guess case. It's only when it's possible and when it seems appropriate. Also, this last point of drawing up a contract, your relationship with your children better, of course, and if you feel like that might be something that might be useful, or you would like to try it out, of put it in writing, all of it, and you signed it and they signed it, and it's more of like now you have this responsibility that feels more formal. It doesn't have to be quite as formal, I guess, but it kind of just establish it on paper, and it's just a different type of communication that you can have with your kid. And please, if you have any questions, please drop them on the box. And so I'm just waiting for my other partner to finish up the translation. And so we come up with the topic of independence, because boundaries and independence go hand in hand. Although, you know, boundaries is setting that limit and maybe just like putting a box around the things that are, you know, permissible in your life and in your kid's life. At the same time, boundaries can create an environment of independence for your child. Especially, I know that that's really a key theme in middle school and high school kids, where, you know, independence is the one thing that they're yearning for in a way, you know, whether it is, you know, by you know, walking to school by themselves, or doing, you know, things by themselves, now that they don't necessarily want mom and dad to be there all the time, right? So children become competent by having rules and limits about behavioral expectations, and they survive and thrive by being both protected from too much and pushed towards enough independent functioning. So definitely this, in fewer words, saying, you know, you know your child better than, you know, anybody out there, and you know what it would be too much for them to handle, and what would be, you know, just enough that they can, you know, they can be challenged enough to go out there and try things by themselves. And having a parameter that you know, that is boundaries, they can appropriately develop that sense of independence. So by providing behavioral limits and structure through childhood, children and teenagers internalize boundaries and become increasingly responsible. An example that you might be that we might be putting out there is asking your child to pick up after themselves, whether it's their room, whether it's the car that it might be a mess because they borrowed it the night before or whatever. You know, whatever that, you know, you think that, okay, my kid is old enough to do these things. Like, I don't have to be telling them all the time, you know. I don't want to be the one telling them all the time what they need to do, because they already know. And I'm sure that they don't want to hear it for the 10th time, right? And so by letting them carry on with the task independently, and letting them know that, hey, yeah, I know that, you know, you might be tired from practice, or from going out the night before, that, you know, you might not want to do this, but you know that this is the boundary that we've had agreed on, that you can borrow the car, or you can go to Sally's house, you know, after you respect this boundary that we put in place. But once this boundary is broken, you know what are the consequences, you know that if this doesn't happen, then the natural consequence is that you might not be able to do what we have agreed would be a good way to be compensated, in a way, you know, and put it in the, you know, in some sort of words. So yeah, I mean, independence grows from boundaries. It helps the child understand what is a healthy way to create independence. And so that is one of the things that, you know, stems out of putting those boundaries on, or even talking about boundaries from an early age, for sure. And we can talk about barriers, of course. Like, you know, might have crafted an idea of what we might be putting, you know, like what kind of boundaries I want to put around my kids, and what kind of, or with my kids, not around, but with my kids. But why is it so difficult to do that? Like, how, you know, like someone already told me that I could start from this point, but how do I actually get there? And like, what is preventing me from putting those boundaries? It seems obvious that no one would want their boundaries to be violated. So sometimes it seems like we allow it. And because sometimes we have fear of this rejection and ultimately abandonment. And as children and teenagers also experience that, they might fear that you might reject them, or you might fear that your teenager might reject your relationship with them. And so, that abandonment, obviously, it's not a good feeling. It's not meant to be a good feeling in a lot of ways. So that might be one way that we allow consciously or subconsciously to for people to break those barriers, because it's easier to please whatever the other person wants to do with us, whether it's physically or emotionally or intellectually. The fear of confrontation too. We are seldom taught how to communicate when there's a confrontation going on. And confrontation always sounds like a very intense and angry interaction, which doesn't have to be, right? I mean, a confrontation can be calm, collected, and still have, you can still show your disagreement to what the other person has done, in this case broken your boundary. And there can still be some sort of control in that conversation. It doesn't have to be a chaotic interaction, for sure. But you can only control your side, so you can there's no way of knowing how the other person is gonna react to that confrontation. So that's where the fear comes from in a lot of ways. Guilt, definitely. You might feel guilty that I'm not letting my kid or my teenager do something that they want to do, or they're gonna get upset with me because this is not something that we've agreed on, and I already I've already put this boundary and they're not following it. So I feel guilty that they don't get to do the things that they want, and at the same time they're getting upset at me, or the other person is getting upset at me. So a lot of guilt can grow from that. We were not taught healthy boundaries. Of course, boundaries is a word that we've heard a lot lately, but I don't think it's something that even our parents, we're able to have that conversation as openly as we can with these workshops. This is not something that usually you see in it has been facilitated by this type of mediums, of course. And so one step towards that we can make that change is just attending these spaces. And safety concerns, we are concerned that something bad might happen if you don't allow to do some if you allow this, you preserve your boundary, and you don't know how the other person is going to react, and there might be some safety concerns in that regards with your kids or the other person that you're trying to put that boundary on. And so we have a demonstration right now. This is a video that we wanted to show for many reasons, because it shows a little bit more of like the type of parent, to reflect what the type of parenting that you might be that you might implement, and how that is or you would like to strive to change, or if you feel identified in any way about it. And it has to do a lot with boundaries as well. So we're gonna play it. It's about 9 minutes, and so it's in English, but there's some translation in Spanish as well.
One of the most frustrating things for parents is getting their children to do what they want. We all feel that we should just be able to say, yeah, do this, do that, but they don't. Children don't do what we ask them to do often. And worse yet, sometimes they do things that we ask them not to do. And it's hard to stop them from doing those things. When a parent wants a child to stop doing something, that's called setting a limit. The parent sets a limit and says, no, 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 stop, don't do that, right? Or sometimes a parent says they want you to do something to the child. So the parent says, yes, you may watch that show on your screen, but first you must do your homework. That's also setting a limit when you're trying to get them to do something. And parents find setting limits to be the hardest thing because children don't necessarily cooperate with them. And the parent doesn't want to be mean, but they need to get the child to do what they want. So researchers have looked at this problem and they've discovered that there are basically 4 ways that parents deal with it. The first way that's very common is that parents are very strict and they say, do this now, don't do that. And they might smack their child or they might punish their child, but they try very hard to be strict to make the child do what they want. That's one approach. We call that the authoritarian or strict approach. The problem with that is that the child doesn't necessarily learn to think for themselves. They're doing what you want only because they're a little frightened. And so you keep having to get more and more, you punish more because otherwise they stop listening to you. And for children who are very strong-willed, they will just become rebellious. They will just say, no, you can't make me do it. And even children who are not strong-willed, they may appear to comply with you, but often they are secretly learning to lie to you. So authoritarian parenting, when kids grow up, the research shows doesn't work all that well. And so those children really don't get help with their emotions. So as I say, they tend to be more angry as they get older. And they also are not very close to their parents. So that's one way to set limits. But there's another way, as you can imagine. It's sort of the opposite of that. So that is permissive parenting, where you don't set any limits. But that's not good either. First of all, those children can be very hard to live with because they're spoiled, they want their way, and they expect that the parent will do whatever they want and will say yes to them. They also don't develop good habits. They don't get their homework done. They don't do what the parent is asking. In fact, they don't learn self-discipline because they're not asked to. The parent is not really asking them to learn self-discipline, to learn self-control. The parent often doesn't want the child to be unhappy. So the parent says when the child might, let's say you have a child who gets angry and they throw their toy across the room and they break their toy, right? Well, what would the authoritarian parent do, the strict parent? They would say, you don't deserve nice things. Onto the naughty step with you, or smack, right? And by comparison, what would the permissive parent do? When the child gets angry, they're so angry, they throw their toy, the toy breaks. And what does the permissive parent say? This child is so sad their toy broke, they're crying. And the permissive parent says, oh, don't cry, we'll get you another one. And of course, that's not good for the child either. What's that child learning? That child's learning that there are no consequences to their actions. That child's learning that they don't have to control themselves, right? But they're learning something else that might even be worse. They're learning that their emotions are dangerous, that their parent thinks the emotions are dangerous, and that the parent can't handle their emotions and will do anything to stop them from crying. So this is a child who will use that against the parent, but also might internalize that. They might begin to think that their emotions are dangerous and that they shouldn't feel those big emotions. And so they stuff their emotions. And what happens then? Well, emotions that are stuffed don't really stay stuffed. They start to bubble up to get healed, just like an infection would. An infection in your body would bubble up to get healed. Well, so would those stuffed feelings. And that makes the child anxious. So children who have permissive parenting get much more anxious. Children need clear limits or they become more anxious. They need clear limits so that they become self-disciplined. But they don't need the strict limits. So I said there were 4 ways that parents handle setting limits. One of them is authoritarianism. One is permissiveness. The third is just ignoring the limits and often ignoring the child. And these parents are usually so overwhelmed. They're working 2 jobs, or maybe they have an addiction problem. They just can't cope. And so they're unable to really show up and set limits for their child. And these kids really do the worst. They have the worst prognosis because they don't feel cared about. They don't feel like they matter to anyone. So they don't learn self-discipline. They don't learn to manage themselves emotionally, and they also don't feel cared about. Often by the time they're teenagers, they are looking for love in all the wrong places. And they are often even self-medicating. These are kids who end up with addiction problems as teenagers. So ignoring your child and not setting limits at all is not the answer. But I said there were 4 possibilities. Now we're on to the 4th one. The fourth possibility for parents is what we would call setting limits, but setting them with empathy. So empathic limits. And that sounds like, well, what does that mean? It just means you set the limits you need to set, but you do it with empathy, which is an understanding of how the child is feeling. You're helping them with their emotions, right? So the child with the toy who got so angry and they rolled their toy across the room and broke it, this parent is not going to go buy another toy, but they're also not going to get angry at the child. This parent will say, oh, you're so sad, you're crying, you broke your toy, you were so mad, right? You took it and you threw it. And then what happened? It broke. That's right. Your toy broke because you threw it. Yeah, I know that makes you so sad. No, sweetheart, we're not going to buy another toy. That was the only toy like that we had. We're not buying another one. It's not in our budget. I know that makes you very sad. And you give the child a hug, right? And they're allowed to have all their feelings about it, but you still don't go buy the new toy. You're not protecting the child from the consequences of their action. You're not protecting your child from feeling uncomfortable, right? You're setting whatever limit you need to. So we set limits all day, every day as parents, right? And what happens if your child won't do what you ask? Well, you can become more authoritarian. You can say, do that now, or I will punish you. Well, we've already said that doesn't really work. Or you could become more permissive and say, oh, I don't care, go watch TV, right? And that doesn't work either, as we've learned, that permissive parenting. What does work is to say to the child, I know, it's so hard to sit down and do your homework. I hear you don't want to do it. I know, you've been working all day at school, and the homework still needs to get done. How can we make this work for you, right? So you insist on the limit, but you give your child support so that they can meet your limit, so they can do what you meet your expectations and do what you're asking. And that's true no matter what limit you're setting. You could be setting the limit with your little one that it's bedtime. You could say, I know it's so hard to stop playing and get ready for bed. And it's bedtime. Come on, let's go. Let's pick out a story to read together, right? And if the child still resists, you might say, I know it's so hard to stop playing. I bet when you grow up, you'll never go to bed, will you?
So yes, I let her play a little bit longer, but yeah, basically this is one of the boundaries that we can or what I would be curious to know the type of reactions that you guys have about that. And so thank you so much. This is the end of our presentation. This is, if you have any questions or comments later on, definitely we can be of support. Bianca in our and my contact information is in the it's here. You can text us or call us or send us an email regarding the any questions that you may have. I'm going to stop sharing our screen to see if there's any questions or discussion.
If you have any questions at this time, you can go ahead and write them in the Q&A, and we will read them out so that our presenters can answer anything that you might have wondered about during their presentation or would like to know more about. So feel free to use that Q&A and let us know what we can help with. And thank you to Cecia and Bianca for such a great presentation.
En este momento, si tienen alguna pregunta, entonces libres de dejarlo ahí en el Q&A, en preguntas y respuestas. Están Bianca y Ceci aquí para contestar cualquier duda. Muchas gracias, Ceci. Muchas gracias, Bianca. Muchas gracias, Hernán. Una presentación muy bonita. Bueno, ¿podría yo empezar con una pregunta? Hablaste un poquito de poner los límites y también el respeto y crear esa relación de confianza. Siento que de pronto para muchos de nuestros padres es difícil, ¿no? También dijiste que muchos también trabajan de pronto 2 trabajos, no tienen este tiempo. ¿Qué consejos puedes dar al punto de poder combinar estas 3 cosas y que de pronto sea efectivo? The question I was asking Ceci and Bianca is, they talked a little bit about boundaries, respect, creating this trustworthiness. I know a lot of us might be working double shifts and not have enough time to actually sit down with our children and create these 3 steps of like, what are our limits? Well, how do we start creating this trustworthiness with them? Especially as they get older, they want their own independence and get their own things done as they become older in age. So I'll give it to Cecia and what kind of tips you might have for us.
Yeah, I think that consistency is key. And, you know, like that, like we talked about with communication, having that clear communication and age appropriate, right? Because you want to, you know, that relationship with your kid as they are maturing, you want to evolve that relationship or you want to, evolve that relationship as well in the way that you talk to that kid and to your kid. And so having that communication of like using appropriate words and words that, you know that your kid is going to understand, and you can both agree on a same definition, that you agree, hey, I know that you're capable of following these instructions because I know you're smart. I know that you can do these things. And you have showed me that you understand and you are aware that, that we are in the same page. And so having that mutual respect, that you have the trust, that they are able to do this. And because sometimes it's like, but mom, this is too hard to follow, or how do you expect me to do this? It's because I love you, and you're this person that has accomplished so much, and so like praising that good behavior that you have seen in the past, and how that can be an example of like you are capable of these things. And so communication, discipline in terms of discipline, in the terms of being consistent with that behavior, right? Of like always trying to like put that boundary and like try to always respect it, and that it's okay to make mistakes, but we are going to be working on trying to minimize those mistakes. So that collaboration, I think it's like not, it breaks that power struggle of like, you do as I say, and because I say so, and I'm the parent. It's like rather that we're both here in terms of boundaries, and we can work together through these sort of things. So I don't know if that answers some of your a good question that you had.
That was great. Thank you.
Also, so they gave their information as well. I'm putting in the chat to everybody as well, my email and Jimena's email, if you should have any questions that you think of later, or would like to reach out to Cecia or Bianca. You had their information, but you have ours as well if you need to contact us. But feel free to write anything in the question and answer as well. We're happy to answer them out. I know Cecia and Bianca are happy to as well.
Definitely.
Give a minute for questions and see if anybody's brave enough to type something in.
Right. A ver quién es valiente, hace cualquier pregunta. Aquí estamos.
Well, maybe somebody is writing. I just want to thank Side by Side, thank Vernon and Cecia and Bianca again for being here tonight and putting together this presentation for us. And thank you to everybody that was able to attend and be here for this. And we also, like I said, have recorded it, and we will be sending out the link for any that cannot attend as well.
Mientras que van escribiendo sus preguntas, les queremos dar muchas gracias. Un aplauso gigante a ustedes, muchachas. Gracias Side by Side por estar aquí. Gracias a Vernon también por mantenerse en la presentación durante el tiempo escuchando. Espero que les haya gustado, que así ha sido su interés. Y de nuevo, muchas gracias Side by Side por estar aquí con nosotros en esta colaboración con Petaluma City Schools.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, I don't see any questions in the chat. We've given some time. So I think at this point, we are going to go ahead and end our evening. And again, thank you for being here. I hope everybody has a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias por
likewise.
estar aquí.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.